Hey, in this video we're going to be looking at multiplying fractions. So in this video we'll be looking at what actually happens when we multiply fractions. So we're going to do this in two parts. The first part is the understanding behind what and why and how it's happening. In the next video we'll look at a quick and simple strategy for working out fraction multiplications quite quickly. So let's have a look at what's happening when we multiply fractions. Now you may say this isn't fractions, this is 4 multiplied by 1. Yes it is, but it's a good start for us because to understand this will help us understand what's going on when we multiply fractions. Now in this rather simple calculation we are looking at 4 multiplied by 1. Now we can look at that as saying 4 lots of 1. So what are 4 lots of 1? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 4. Or you can look at it the other way round, where we are looking at what is 1 lot of 4. So what is 1 4? What is 1 lot of 4? Well, 1 lot of 4 is 4. If sweets come in packs of 4, if I said what is 1 lot of 4 sweets, it would be 4. Okay, so that's a fairly straightforward one. So we're going to take that a step further this time, and we're going to look at a fraction. Excuse me. So in this case, we've got 4 multiplied by a half. Now we could look at it in terms of what are 4 halves, which might be a bit simpler for this one. So 4 halves, so if we split, I've got 4 rectangles here, which are representing my 4 whole numbers. So if I said what are 4 halves, if I split each of them into half very quickly, which these aren't exactly halves, I've got 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves and 4 halves. 1 half plus 1 half is 1, plus 1 half is 1 and a half, plus another half would be 2. What we actually want to have a look at though is the other way around, like we did with the last calculation. We want to know not what are 4 halves, but instead what is half of 4. So if I take my 4 holes here and I split them into 2 halves and shade 1 half, I would end up with something like this, and you can see I've got 2 shaded halves. So I took the 4 holes, I split them in 2 and was left with, and then asked how many holes have I got in 1 half, which is 2. So if we have a look at this in terms of a calculation with just fractions, like this one, I've got 1/4 multiplied by 1 half. So again, we're going to ask, what is 1 half of a quarter? Just like we asked, what is 1 lot of 4? And we asked, what is 1 half of 4? Now this is sounding a lot like division, and I appreciate this, and it is, in terms of finding halves and quarters and sort of splitting shapes up, but you've got to sort of read it as a sentence. So you're here, you're finding what is 1 half of 1/4. So what we're going to do, like we've done before, is we're going to look at this visually. So here I have got a rectangle which is going to represent 1 whole. Now we only want to know about a quarter of it, so we're going to split it up into quarters like that, and we're only interested in 1/4 of it as the numerator tells us, so we're going to shade 1/4 of it like this. And then we can go back to our second fraction here. So what is 1 half of a quarter? We want to know a half lot of a quarter. So to do that, we need to split our quarter up here, because this is 1/4 of our shape. So let's label this as a quarter. Let's label it above. Why not? That make it a bit easier. So this is 1/4 of our shape, but we want to know what half of it is. So we look at the denominator here, which tells us that we're going to split it into 2 equal parts. So I'm going to go ahead and split that into 2 as equally as I can. I'm going to carry that split all the way through our whole, because that's going to help us later. Now each of those, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, each of these is now a half. Not a half of the whole shape, but a half of that quarter. And then we're going to ask, well, what is 1/2 of a quarter as a fraction in terms of the whole shape? So we're going to take one of those halves, so that's 1, and we're going to count how many it's now out of, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's 8. So 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. So let's have another look at another example. So once again we've got a quarter. This time we're multiplying by 1/3. So let's get our shape and split it into quarters and go ahead and shade one of those quarters. So this is 1/4 out of the whole shape. Now maybe you might want to pause the video here and have a go at doing this yourself, the next step, and then I'll explain how I would go about doing it. Okay, so once again we're asking, what is 1/3 of 1/4? We found what 1/4 is, so now we need to find what 1/3 of it is. So we're going to split that quarter up into 3 parts, and we're splitting it into 3 parts because we're trying to find 1/3. So let's split it as evenly as we can. Now this isn't perfect. Technically fractions should be completely equal, but as we're just doing jottings, that's fine. So each of those is now 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. Now remember, they're not 1/3 of the whole shape, but 1/3 of this 1/4. And once again we're going to ask, well, what fraction is that 1/3 of 1/4? So we can count up, so it's 1, and we're going to count up how many parts that we've split the whole into now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 1/3 of 1/4 is 1/12. 12. Okay. Now it gets a little bit conceptual because you're looking at fractions of a fraction. But if you look at it representationally like this, you get a sense of what's going on. Right, so we've got a bit of a challenging one here now. So we've got 1/5 multiplied by 2/3. Now this gets a little bit tricky now, but that's fine. We'll keep going. So once again, we want to find out what 1/5 is. So let's give ourselves a shaded fifth. So we've got a whole rectangle here split into 5 parts. So 1/5 would be this part of it here. What colour should we go for? Let's go for a nice yellowy orange, gold colour, why not? Now once again we're going to look at what we're looking for. Well, we're looking for thirds. We're not just looking for 1/3 though, we're looking for 2/3. But we still need to split that 1/5. Let's label our 1/5 again. So this coloured bar is now 1/5 of our whole shape here. So once again we're going to look at the denominator here, and you can see we want to find thirds of this, so we're going to split our shape into 3 parts. What we're actually doing is splitting this fifth into 3 parts. Okay, so now we have got 1/3. This is 1/3 of 1/5, 1/3 of 1/5, and 1/3 of 1/5. Now the difference here, because our numerator is larger than 1, is we're actually now trying to find 2/3, not just 1/3 but 2/3. So instead of just counting one of these sections out of the whole, we need to count 2 of them. So let's just put a box around 2 of these thirds, which would make 2/3. Now how many parts have we got in there? Well, we've got 2 parts in there, haven't we? 1, 2 inside our new group. So we have 2 parts out of how many in total? So let's count them up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15. Okay, so 1/5 multiplied by 2/3 is 2/15, and you can see there that we're still splitting it into 1/3, but because we want to know about 2 of those thirds, we need to make sure that we count both of those. And that's the understanding behind why multiplying fractions might work. In the next video we'll look at a quick and easy strategy for multiplying our calculations like this one here without having to draw out our visual representations. But if in doubt, get your pencil out and have a go at drawing them out. Perhaps as we've been going along you've been noticing some of the patterns that arise as we've been going along. So until next time, keep practicing and keep having fun.